Which
Another
coin is
area
that,
of
just
bear.
for our viewers, so they can start aping? No, I'm just kidding. What actual ticker is that? Welcome, everyone, for another episode of Tools of the Trade. I'm your host, Captain Cole. Trip, my man, how we doing?
Good. How you doing, man?
I'm good, dude. It's good to be back behind the charts. Had a fun morning this last day. So it's good to get back behind the charts. We have an awesome episode today. We have two very good friends of ours we've come to get very close with over the past several years, and it's kind of just serendipitous the way our relationship evolved and kind of got to where it is today. So, without further ado, let's bring on Shub and Vineet from Hyblock Capital. How's it going, guys?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having us on.
Awesome.
What's up, gents? I think, oh man, when did we first connect with Hyblock? What, 3 years?
I don't even know. It's been maybe a couple of years for sure.
Yeah, and then we actually first got to meet at the beginning of, the end of last year. We had dinner in New York and we talked about a lot of product rollout. As we've seen, the Phemex integration is really cool. That's obviously our exclusive partner. So just cool to bring people together and build that out more. But I think the whole concept here and the purpose of this episode is to show people that there's a lot more tool sets that, I think we know that Amoeba is one of the masters around the histogram. I myself am looking to learn a lot more here. I think Zoran is as well. And so we figured what a better way to do it than have the founders on to give kind of an educational approach, masterclass to looking at, coin screener, histogram, which could hopefully help people down the road.
Before we kind of dive into it, I want to do a quick take, Trip. If you can give us a little bit of a macro backdrop, just kind of set the stage for this episode, what we're looking at in terms of going into the rest of this, or the end of the summer, I should say, going into the fourth quarter, how we're approaching the markets, and then we'll kind of jump right into the educational masterclass.
Yeah, I mean, without going into too much detail around, I think the interesting thing is you're trading now back above the 50-day moving average on both the S&P and the NASDAQ. The big jolt or kind of move back up was largely in the face of, I like to think that it was probably the jolt job openings, which came in a lot softer than expected, which, as we know, the Fed has talked about, softening labor market because it's been tight. So that right there is an indication of the tightening monetary policy that's been happening, and the actions by the Fed could start to be rippling through. And if we look at, the economic calendar tomorrow, we're going to be getting initial jobless claims. We'll have PCE, and then we have non-farm payroll unemployment rate. So kind of the theme of that labor market employment, which is something that they've continued to harp on, as well as PCE over CPI, it's going to be interesting to see. But as we know, crypto kind of caught a nice tailwind with the news around Grayscale. Always funny how people get really excited about that stuff because it didn't necessarily mean the ETF's happening. It's one step closer. It's one step closer to a win for crypto as a whole versus the SEC, which, as you saw with Ripple before. So there's steps being taken to where confidence is showing in that kind of area around the ETFs. I mean, we have September 1st and September 2nd, I think, is Bitwise, and then BlackRock, if I'm correct.
It's supposed to be all on Friday, I believe.
Yeah.
September 2nd is technically Saturday, but yeah. It's
setting an interesting stage in both macro and risk assets, as well as crypto. If we look at our BTC versus ES chart, we were on these bottom bands, and then bam, you pop, right? And so is there going to be follow through on this? Is that going to come on the heels of more positive news? Right now, I think people were really caught off guard positioning wise, both in crypto as well as equities. You had this kind of move down in the NASDAQ. Some of the leaders sold off, and then, here we are with the schizo market ripping back up into the end of summer. We're going into Labor Day weekend, and then how does that set up for Q4? And, does the rally continue? It could. It definitely could in the equities world. Crypto is maybe a little more walking on eggshells right now. So
without further ado, let's kind of pivot over and talk about what's the first thing we're going to talk about today, Vineet?
All right. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is the coin screener. So I think the focus of today's lesson is on two of our products, the coin screener and the probability histogram. Like you said, for the majority of timeline of our tool, most people have been focused on the liquidation levels and the liquidation heat map. And our goal today is to educate your audience a little bit on some of our other tools. So
awesome.
Let's start with the coin screener. So that's what I'm showing on my screen right now. What the coin screener essentially is a bird's eye view of one of our indicators across all of the Binance coins that we support. A lot of times traders will open up an indicator on a trading view chart and they'll flip from coin to coin to coin of that same indicator to see if there's some sort of trend or some sort of outlier activity that's going on. This will allow you to kind of scan the market at one time and try to find those opportunities a little bit faster because you're looking at all the coins at once. So let's dive a little bit deeper into what is exactly on my screen right now. So I'm looking at obviously all all the coins that we support for Binance. The indicator that I'm looking at is the global accounts long percentage, which is a Binance indicator that indicates what percentage of all the global accounts on Binance are currently long. It's a percentage based indicator, right? And so this is going to show a heat map that displays the value of that indicator for every coin and how it relates to all the other coins that we support. So if the color of the heat map is very dark, that's going to mean that indicator value is very high relative to all the other coins. And if the color of the heat map is very bright, like this yellow, then that's going to indicate that the value of the indicator is very low relative to the other coins. So you can see some examples here where for this coin, the value was 25%, which was very low. We can go to another.
Which coin is
area
that, just for our viewers, so they can start aping? No, I'm just kidding. What actual ticker is that?
For this one is Tomo, T-O-M-O. The bright one over here, it was SVP. USDT. So this was an area that was very bright. We can also like break this down a little bit further. So if you kind of are experienced with this indicator, sometimes you only want to look at like very high end of the spectrum or the very low end of the spectrum, right? So for example, this is showing the global account. So a strategy behind this could mean I want to look when the indicator value is on the lower end of the spectrum, because to me, this is like a retail focused indicator. And when it's on the lower end of the spectrum, that means that most of retail is short. So there could be potentially like a short squeeze happening. That could mean some sort of price reversal or price going to the upside. We can kind of narrow down that section. And if we look at the heat map here, we can see the lower end of the spectrum is kind of 30% or lower. So what I can do is I can scroll up to the top and I have what's called a minimum color scale and a maximum color scale. So let's say I make the minimum color scale 20 and the max color scale 40, and I can hit filter. So now you can see that the map looks a little bit more, it looks different, but a lot clearer, right? So those areas that are lower in the spectrum are standing out a lot more.
Yeah, and I think this makes the whole bird's eye view concept a lot easier to digest, because obviously you're seeing so many coins. So by filtering it and kind of just highlighting the coins that are sticking out in the range you're looking for, you can then do a deeper dive, right? So like, for example, Vineet, you filtered on this particular range, and obviously there's some of these coins which in the past had stuck out, and so you can see now they're not anymore, but there's two coins that I think
So
that's...
what is that, Unify?
But so that's Unify, and then the coin above that is TRB, exactly. So what this means is that these two coins are essentially, they have a very low long percentage. So the way you're reading that is, if we know all accounts in Binance for that particular coin that are in a position have a very low long percentage, which means the other side, the short percentage is pretty high, that could mean that there's a short squeeze, right? Because there's such little longs and so many shorts. And we all know that, when it's very offsides in one direction, it tends to go the other way. And so this is a quick way of kind of finding that opportunity or that kind of outlier versus going through every single trading view chart one by one. We don't all have the time to do that. So this is that bird's eye view.
I like that you guys, I didn't even know about the minimum and the maximum scale at the top, because I've been using it basically just vanilla as is, and I'd be like looking for coins to fade. If it was, if I had a thesis that Bitcoin was going lower, I'm looking at ID, which was like super long. It was about like 80% long, and I was looking basically for them to get squeezed. And, if I had used a color paint, it would have been much easier to identify, okay, it's ID, not whatever other coins. So nice.
Right, exactly.
So
this is actually a recent feature.
So this, in theory, should translate if you went to the liquidation levels. If these coins are on that, then you would think that the deltas would be significantly red.
Yes, yeah. So you could say that that the deltas could be red. It's a little different because the liquidation levels also looks at the size, so the dollar amount, whereas in this looks at the account. So for example, if you have 100 accounts,
so this one is almost more indicative of almost like the histogram where you're seeing what are whales doing versus retail, because that can be an instance of spot selling into a red
derivatives
delta,
longing,
which you're not you might not get a squeeze. And so 2 points of confluence being, now you understand
exactly
what percentage of traders are long or short on a red delta. The confidence interval of your trade on a squeeze has gone up probably exponentially in my mind. That's why we always defer to Amoeba to try to tell us about the histogram, which you guys are going to tell us. So
no, but I will say just to the coin screener point, and for like our viewers listening, this is starting to become like a really neat way to build a system for yourself. So if you're looking at, you sit down at your desk to trade, you're like, all right, what am I going to trade today? And instead of like how Shub said, you're going to look through 100 trading view charts and decide, okay, my bias is X, Y, and Z. Very simple. Come to the coin screener, have a bias on Bitcoin, and decide, okay, if you're thinking Bitcoin's going up, you're trying to find alts that are potentially being shorted heavily, and they could be ripe for a squeeze for a higher beta play. Conversely, right, if you're looking to trade short, you think Bitcoin's going lower, okay, so what's the alt that's being longed by everyone right now that could potentially get a long squeeze? So this is kind of how you can start building your own system, right? That when I sit down at my desk and I'm like, what am I going to trade today? I jump to the coin screener. Let the data inflect or point you towards what assets you're trading for the day, not your bias per se.
Exactly. Yeah. And the reason why we sort of prefer this view, because I know there's a lot of screeners out there, is that you can also sometimes see the direction that it's trending in. So a lot of the screeners, not just in crypto, but in just in traditional markets, it's sort of that snapshot, which is like, let's look at open interest or volume across all the coins, and you can sort of filter like an Excel file from highs to lows, right? And maybe put some color gradient on it. But it's just for that particular timestamp. What happens with the coin screener is you can actually see it over time and how the whole market is changing. So it's not only the screener of the current snapshot, but it's also the kind of shows you the bigger picture, which way the market is moving, or if one coin is moving in a completely different direction from the other coins from that bird's eye view. So just to give you an example, or I guess first we can look at the open interest, which is here you can see when that big drop happened. It's so super easy to see that clearly there's like this big regime change where you have this dark color and suddenly it drops to this light color, where open interest is just falling across on every single coin. And so if you just scroll up, I can quickly just to show that blue line. So at the top is like this little easy way to understand what's going on, where the candle chart is in this case is in Bitcoin, but you can change that through the settings. The blue line is the global average. This is pretty cool because it's taking the average of open interest across all the coins. So it's like this average global open interest. And then the red line is for that coin, which in this case is Bitcoin. So sometimes you can compare how is Bitcoin's open interest relative to the global average. Is it significantly changing or not? And what I like to do personally is when that drop happened, try to identify coins that didn't change as significantly as the rest of the market, right? Because we know the price drops and everything should be dropping, which is what we're seeing. But some of these coins like this coin, XMR, right? So here you can see that XMR it doesn't really change in color. I don't know if it might be a little hard to see, but you could see that while all the other coins are going from dark to like a bright color, XMR is remaining that bright color. And in fact, only recently, if you look more to the right, is it getting darker now? So the open interest, there's like this lag effect where now it's starting to increase. And we can actually see that on the candle charts. If you scroll up and beneath, and we just change the ticker to XMR, the price still drops on this coin, just like it did on Bitcoin and the other coins. And the blue line is that global open interest, which is dropping, as we all know. But the red line, which is the open interest just for XMR, Monero, is not changing here. So it starts to increase much later, right? And so the whole point, again, of the coin screener is to kind of find that coin that you want to do a deeper dive on. And so now I have a coin to do a deeper dive on, which is XMR. Something was, different relative to the rest of the market. And that's where the trending feature comes in, where you can see which way is a coin trending.
So then in that theory, if XMR all of a sudden the OI was building up and it continued to build up, maybe it could have been indicative that like shorts were continuing to sell without like actually pushing price lower, right? So then the possibility for a squeeze becomes, that much higher in that scenario, just based on open interest itself. Interesting.
Yep, exactly.
Quick, check the liquidation levels.
And it's like these things are just, you can do these without a screener, but it just takes a lot longer to actually identify them. And sometimes you can't even identify it even when you're looking at the coin.
Time is money.
Yep.
Love it.
Exactly.
So then in your guys' opinion, what are the two most, used indicators that you would look at for the coin screener? The global long percentage and open interest?
I would say it depends on kind of your use case with like the chart and what indicators you find useful. I would say like there's pretty much everything that is on the trading view chart is somewhat supported on the coin screener as well. So we've seen some of our users like to look at funding rate as like an indicator on the coin screener. Long percentage definitely. Sometimes just like trade count or volume, seeing how that changes over the spectrum of the coins. I think it varies, but definitely I would say long percentage is one of the most highly used indicators on our platform, let alone coin screener. Another point that I wanted to kind of bring up on this is like the heat map type. So You might have seen me clicking through before, but we have two settings. One is called relative to market and one is called relative to itself. So relative to market is when you take the value of the indicator for that coin and you compare it across all the coins on the list, so the entire spectrum. Sometimes that doesn't necessarily make sense to do. For example, when we're looking at open interest, the value for open interest for BTC and Ethereum is going to be so high on the scale that everything that's not BTC and Ethereum is going to look like one color. For example, what you see here. So for that, you don't want to compare the value across the entire market. You just want to compare the value against its own history. So you just do relative to itself. And now each coin is only comparing, the heat map is generated one row at a time. So BTC is only going to be compared to the values of BTC, Ethereum is only going to be compared to the values of Ethereum, and so on and so forth. Another way of doing it, let's say you do come across an indicator where you do want to compare it across the entire market. Let's say they're all kind of DeFi coins or all coins that kind of move in a similar direction, or all AI coins, something like that. We have another way of doing that where we have this tickers parameter below. So what you can do is you can hit select all, and then you can eliminate the coins that you don't want included in the list. So we can remove BTC from here, and then we can also remove Ethereum, which is right here. And now you can see the heat map is a lot more kind of legible, and you can kind of start seeing some colors on the higher end and the lower end.
Yeah, and essentially what Vinny did here was he removed the outliers, which happen to be Bitcoin and Ethereum in terms of the scale.
Okay, that makes sense.
Sometimes that could be useful if one coin's like volume is significantly different than the others. Like BLZ for one day the volume was extremely high, and you want to look at the coin screener and not have it blur out everything. You can just remove BLZ.
Awesome. Yeah, coin screener seems very useful for newer traders that are kind of directionless and looking how to do business or where to do business. Coin screener is probably a great first stop shop where you sit down at the desk to really pick the asset you're going to trade.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the whole game here is like, how do you find asymmetric returns in the market in a fast manner? Because like I've found myself just going to the liquidation levels page and just like screening, right? Just like, okay, maybe this one, maybe this one, maybe this one, or I'll look at the normal ones that I usually look at and be like, is this a red delta? Is this a green delta? But then this tool is gonna like give me that other side as well, like to understand the positioning. But it's so much faster than just putting a scroll down and like looking for
and and we're definitely going to add the liquidation level count and size to this screener, because I think what you're doing is sort of the use case of the screener, right? So we'll be adding more indicators to this and to make everybody's life easier. And that's the whole point, that like what Zoran was saying earlier, you want to start your like system from the screener and then sort of dive deeper through the other tools that we have.
And guys, that's alpha in and of itself. Like a lot of people who don't know how to trade or like, how do I get started? Like sit down, stare at the coin screener, start there. Like this is the beginnings of a system. So if you can start piecing together different bits and bits that will help you become a better trader, not necessarily more profitable, but at least having a system and a foundation of how you actually approach each trading day, being consistent. This is where it starts, right at the coin screener.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think like there's the tool gives like a few kind of like, it gives a lot of information, and I think there's a few stories that you can get from the coin screener. One is obviously just pinpointing areas that is an outlier across the universe of coins, finding where that happened. Also, you can see like where things are generally trending. Maybe you don't necessarily want to look at like the brightest spot or the darkest spot, but you're interested in like a specific coin, and is that trending on the upside or trending on the downside? And seeing that on a heat map can sometimes make the picture a little bit more clear. And then on top of that, you can also kind of see with the graph that we put on top of it, it's easy to kind of validate some sort of opinion or a hypothesis that you have. We'll also talk about later in the conversation, like how our tools kind of fit all together. Like each of our tools are not supposed to be used in isolation, and Shub will talk about like how this and the histogram can be used in like a pair. Mm-hmm. But like, for example, if you're looking at BLZ right here, we can see that, it started to go from like a darker color to like a brighter color over here, and we can see on top I've put the BLC pricing chart. The red line shows where the global long percentage dropped, and you can see like how kind of price reacted to that. So it's somewhat of a tool where you can kind of see the trend, but then also validate if price moved in the direction of your opinion.
Yeah, this is one that always seems to have some sort of negative funding rate.
Yeah.
So it's squeezed, right? I use a different place to find funding rates just because, but now you can use funding rates on this thing.
Yeah, you can. Yes. You want to just click into that real quick?
So that's going to be the Binance funding rate, because that's the only one that really matters.
That's the Binance. Yeah, we have the Binance funding rate at the moment. So essentially, what you're seeing here is all the coins again, and the brighter spots are the ones that have a negative funding rate, and the darker spots are the ones that have a positive funding rate. And so if you wanted to, again, I would probably use a filter here, just because there is a lot of coins. So I maybe if you just want to see the negative funding rate coins, you could filter that for just the extreme negative values. And so in this case,
what's that one? It's like white, or is it just blocked out?
Sometimes it's white because Binance is not we're not able to get the data. It's not because again this is like over 200 coins, so sometimes you miss one 5-minute candle because this is on a 5-minute time frame, and so it shows up as white.
So what was the yellow there?
So here, yeah, the yellow in this example is very negative funding rate.
And that's which coin?
Bluezo.
Yeah. So that's All
exactly.
right. So this is much easier than going on freaking CoinGlass. I didn't know the funding was in here. All right. Cool.
Yep. And so you can exactly. The funding rate is easy to identify here. Almost any indicator. Our goal is not to just continuously add indicators to this, right? So the liquidation ratio, the count, etc. So it'll be easier to scan. And I just wanted to show this one example, maybe for like a real-time example. We can track it over the next couple of days. Vineet, can you go back to the long percentage? That's another use case on how we can use the coin screener. So just if you again, Vineet was mentioning how sometimes you can use it to see if coins are trending. And so, is this the 4-hour time frame?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So, if you scroll down, trying to find a coin recently that's been moving a lot, what we're looking for is a change in color that shifted really fast, and it's a lot easier sometimes to see it with color versus numbers, right? If you're just seeing numbers go down, it's sometimes hard to identify. So this coin here, Zen, you'll notice that around there's this area where it suddenly drops in color and becomes brighter, and that's your trend happening, right? So it's in the 65% range, and suddenly it drops into this 45% range. And it's even though most of the other coins are also dropping a long percentage, this one's really standing out in terms of its trend. And so it's obviously happening today or over today/yesterday, so we can see how it's going to over the next couple of days see how it moves. But this is what I use a coin screener when I'm using it in real time, is to kind of identify this more recent short-term trend.
So then to that effect, I guess just to clarify for people watching that, the fact that it dropped off so quickly from 65 to 45% indicates a shift, right, from that 50%.
Exactly.
That it was heavily long, and now it's being heavily shorted.
Yes, exactly. And most of the coins did fall in that sense, but there's just a lot more on this coin side.
So higher potential to maybe squeeze the shorts out first,
right,
prior to other moves. Makes sense.
Yeah, that. Right. So that's where you do the deeper dive. You look at open interest, volume, is there any larger players buying, all that. The whole point of this is to do that deeper dive, and so you can find that in this particular manner.
Awesome. I'm going to ask the chat if there's any questions on the coin screener. If not, I think we can pivot to the histogram. Chat, if there's any last minute questions on anything unclear about the coin screener, speak now or forever hold your peace. Otherwise, let's see what the histogram has to tell us.
Okay, great. Yep, let's move on to that one. So let me just change my products. Chub, you want to get started on this while I set up my screen?
Yeah. So the probability histogram is essentially this tool, which I know comes across as pretty complex when you first look at it, but it's actually not that complex. So essentially, maybe I'll start with some theory to give some background on it. So a lot of times, whether it's indicators or just real life, people drop an indicator with its average, right? So you might say the average height is 5'6" or something like that, and but we know that's relevant because we know that most people are between a certain range of height, but sometimes we don't know that when it comes to an actual indicator, right? So if I say the average number of trades in a 5-minute candle is 800, Well, I don't know if that's does it range between 200 to like 2,000, or does it range between 600 to 1,000, right? How tight or how volatile is it? And so it's important to know that, because you can have, every coin has its own pattern. So let's say I pick some indicator like long percentage, and I look at the last whatever one day, and the values fluctuate between 50, 60, 50, 60, and just keeps going back and forth between 50 and 60. The average is 55% in that case. But then if I name another coin where the values is like 10%, 90, 20, 80, like it's all over the place, but the average is also 55%. If I just tell you that this is the average, you're not going to, sure, that's useful, but you're not going to know really the underlying distribution of that coin. And that's pretty powerful, because to know that is, you can derive a lot of things from that. And so the distributions do matter, and the histogram is kind of highlighting that. And so Vineet will dive more into that, but what we try to capture is the frequency at different values of that indicator. How often was it at, let's say, 50%? How often was it at 55? How often was it at 60%? And that gives you an idea of like, is the current value an outlier, right? Because every indicator has its own pattern, has its own distribution. And so it has if it's at a value that hasn't occurred in the past, the histogram will make that easier to visualize.
Okay, cool. So thanks, Shub. So let me dive right into what I'm showing on my screen. So right now I'm looking at BTC. My look back period is 30 days. And I'm looking at, again, similar indicators to what we were talking about earlier, the global accounts long percentage on Binance. We're looking at top trader positions, long percentage on Binance. I don't know if we discussed this during the coin screener, but essentially this indicator is looking at the percentage of positions across the long percentage of positions for top traders. And every kind of exchange has their own definition of what they classify as a top trader. Binance has their own classification. So this is taking that classification of top trader, looking at their positions and telling you what percentage of those positions is long, okay? As well as open interest. And we're creating the probability distributions or the histograms across these three indicators. So for the first one, we'll look at the global longs. The x-axis is showing you the different indicator values that we've seen across these 30 days. And the y-axis is telling you the count or the frequency, how many times we've seen this value occur in that time frame, okay? So you can see that most of the time, the values have been in this kind of region right over here, with a few occurrences, between 50% to, let's say around 63%. So what could we kind of get out of this? So one, we know where the cluster kind of is mostly between. Most of the time the indicator value is between 65 to 72%. We also know the range that's kind of relevant for this indicator. So whenever we think about extreme high or extreme low for an indicator, we have to take into consideration what is the relevant range that we're talking about. This is a percentage-based indicator, so technically it could range from like 0 to 100, but that's not relevant to its historical patterns, right? So historically, the low that we've seen in the last 30 days is 50%. The high is around, let's say, 74%, right? Where are we sitting right now in this distribution? That's this dotted line right here. So right now we are, a little bit higher than 60%. Actually, the exact number is shown right here, which is 60.24%. And to kind of like quantify, how much to the left we are in this graph, we have a little percentage here. So what this is telling you is that 14% of the time in the last 30 days, the value of this indicator has been lower, right? So less than where it currently sits right now. Okay, so 14% of the data sits right here, which means about 85% of the data is on the right side. Okay, and then the last thing is the delta, right? So how much did this indicator move within the last 24 hours? So it's moved in the positive direction by 7%, right? Now on the other side, we have the top trader long positions distribution, right? Again, they're both these indicators are coming from Binance. Both these indicators are percentage-based indicators, but the relevant range for these indicators is completely different, right? So we talked about for the global longs, the low was 50, the high was about 74. For the top trader positions, the low is about 50 and the high is about 59. So it's a much more narrow kind of range that this indicator works in between. And that helps puts things into perspective, right? So if I were to tell you that 50% of the top trader long percentage the top trader long percentage was 50%, without kind of seeing this distribution, you might come up with the assumption that, 50% are long, 50% are short. That's pretty neutral. I'm not going to really make any decisions based on this. But looking at the histogram, you can see that 50% is way on the left side of the spectrum. In fact, it rarely happens. So that could be some sort of kind of bearish signal that, a lot of these top traders are currently in a short or more short than what they usually are. Same on the flip side, saying that 60% of the top traders are long, that seems close to 50-50, but in actuality, within the last 30 days, 60% has never happened. So that's on the other side of the spectrum.
No, I mean, I think that's it. And so, again, similar to the coin screener, you kind of want to use it to find the outliers. And for that, it's that dashed line that you're seeing, which is the current value of the indicator. So in both of those top two graphs, the dashed line is kind of in the middle of the chart. And so that means it's somewhere, it's not a massive outlier. So in that first chart, when you see that value 14.152, that means, I think we mentioned that earlier, that means historically in the last 30 days, 14% of the time, the value has been lower and the remaining 86% has been higher. So it's not a massive outlier, really. You want to look for values that are kind of like 98th percentile or 99 when the dashed line is all the way on the right. Or if it's all the way on the left of the chart, you might see like the first percentile, the second percentile, the third percentile. And that kind of makes you go, oh, wait a second, this is like basically never happening. It's either at its all-time low or all-time high when it comes to the last, in this case, the last 30 days. Depends on what time, what look back you've selected. But that helps find the outlier. And a lot of the times, because we have multiple indicators or multiple histograms, you can put them side by side and see, is it an outlier on just one indicator, or is it happening across all, multiple indicators?
Is there a preferred time frame for lookbacks that you like to, I guess, put more weight to? It's kind of like the liquidation heat map, like 12-hour, maybe not really telling you much. 7-day, yes. Very interesting. Monthly, okay, now we're starting to get into some serious areas of interest.
Yeah. And again, I think you kind of want to look at maybe at least two different lookbacks when you're looking at this, just like you do with maybe the liquidation heat map, because one is telling you like the larger time frame. So if you're kind of trading with a longer time frame, maybe investing over the next couple of weeks versus scalping, that would change the look back you're looking at. So maybe your long-term bias can be formed by a 60-day or 90-day, and your short-term bias can be formed by like a 7-day. But ultimately, if it's an outlier, let's say on a higher look back, let's say we are on the 90-day look back, and the dashed line is all the way on the left or all the way on the right, that means it's even of a bigger outlier, because now it's an outlier on a 90-day basis, right? So it's much harder to be an outlier when you have more data.
Right.
And so if you see it being an outlier in the larger time frames, then it's even more significant in my opinion.
Yeah. Then that you're basically illustrating potential accumulation or distribution by looking at these three metrics.
Exactly. So to answer your question, I'd definitely put more weight on the higher lookbacks if you do see an outlier. Just because it's less likely than on the lower look back.
So then we can look at the open interest one, and maybe after that it would be interesting to look at XMR on this, given we noticed that as an outlier on the coin screener. Where if there's any examples you guys have.
Yeah, we can dive into XMR. We can also look into I think it was Zen.
I think one thing that Zen was one that we can look at first, just because I know that was something that we talked about at the end of the coin screener call or conversation. So if I go to Zen and I load the indicators again, so global top trader.
And Zen was a coin that had we saw a long percentage started to decrease suddenly, more rapidly than the other coins,
from 60 to 40.
So right off the bat, visually, you can see that dashed line is like very over to the left.
Exactly. And that value in the brackets where it says Px less than, I know this is a little complicated, but the way to read that is P stands for probability. So basically probability that, and X is the current value. This is just like a statistical term. So probability that the current value is less than or equal to 44.99, which is a dashed line. That's 2.854%. So in other words, if I had to translate that, I'd read it as historically, only 2.8% of the time has a value been lower than this. 98% of the time it's been higher. So clearly, it's in the second percentile, it's an outlier.
And you're getting a similar number, or like low probability on the top trader accounts. So you have confluence with both indicators there.
Yep, exactly.
And then the number of trades distribution, or would you be looking at open interest?
So we could throw on open interest. Yeah, so this is interesting because open interest is not an outlier. It's like in the middle, which is in the 44th percentile. But what you're seeing here, like there's different sort of patterns of distribution, which is where are the values occurring. And this is kind of interesting because a lot of the times open interest is either really low, in that $3.5 million range, or on the higher side, in that 6 to like 6.5. So there's kind of this gap, where you don't see a lot of open interest. Like it hasn't stayed at this point, which means it was flat for a while at the 3.5 million range, and it was flat for a while at the 6 million range, but it just went up and down and never really, the occurrences around that current value of 5 million didn't happen too often. So sometimes what this could tell us is that
it's gonna move.
Exactly.
Like it's foreshadowing of where the open interest could potentially go.
Exactly.
It's about to do a catalyst either way.
Exactly.
Yeah, and we all know it's all probabilities, right? So it doesn't have to be. It could just continuously build up in this range, but you're just building the odds of confluence in your favor by looking at these things.
So if you continue to come back to this each day and you start to see that percentage drop, like below 2.8, it gets, if it's like 2.42, like when this keeps refreshing, there's a higher probability that you're going to see some sort of drastic move in the open interest, whether it's dropping or increasing.
Yeah, exactly. And it probably price as well, maybe a short squeeze or something along those lines.
Right. And then the number of trades distribution, what's this one really looking at?
So yeah, this is a little confusing to read. We have every indicator if you wanted to look at. So this is obviously very skewed, where you have this really one large bar and everything else is very low. The number of trades means that it's like tape data, how often we're seeing trades occur in a 5-minute basis. And so what you're seeing here is most of the time it's between this like one range. If you scroll over that, it says 0 to 500. So if the number of trades is less than 500, that's pretty much the case. I don't know, like 99% of the time, or not some very high frequency. Right now, we're seeing the number of trades is about 452. Which you can see in the title, X is less than or equal to 452. So that in the last 5-minute candle, that's how many trades occurred. And that's, it's on the higher side, 83rd percentile, but it's not like a crazy outlier or anything like that. So maybe you can't derive too much value from this, but sometimes
maybe it's like you could just say this is heavily bot traded or something. If it's an abnormal amount of trades, because humans aren't clicking that fast, then
exactly. Or some sort of stop hunt where everybody's getting, market orders are being triggered.
That makes sense. I think this is probably a good time to bring on our good buddy Amoeba, so he can kind of chime in and share his thoughts on how he approaches the histogram, because I know in Fishing Club this is our go-to thing for him. Amoeba, what's the histogram looking like on Tomo today, or Ruin, or whatever the case is? So Amoeba, how's it going, man? You here?
Yeah. Hey, how you doing, guys? It's been a minute. So yeah.
Welcome, brother.
Amoeba.
If you'd be so kind to share your screen, Amoeba, and show us how you're using the histogram as of lately, if we can check out some of your examples.
I feel like Amoeba understands the visual aspect of it, but do you actually understand the mathematical aspect of it?
I think I understand what's being represented enough for me to, I don't use every single detail in it, but I managed to build something out of it, which works for my system.
Yeah.
So, what it gives you, it's almost a situation. It's what I use it for, and I use the screener as well. I actually start with the screener. And what it gives you, it's almost, I say, like jigsaw pieces that you start putting together and building almost a situation that you think, oh, I maybe can capitalize on this. So so like the guys explained, and I'm going to start here because I actually I don't know what ticker I'm going to show you. I'm going to look at it the way I normally look into.
We're going to get live analysis from Eba using the
we may not find
histogram.
anything, but I'll show you what I do. So, like the guys explained, I focus on long percentages, global longs. I find that's the prey. That's the retail traders, and I want to bet against them. I normally look at the 1 hour. One thing that we will see today is we had a big move yesterday, so all the data I would think is going to be skewed a little bit. Yeah, which is see this changing color here for almost every coin. That's the pump, which is that line that you see there. So rather than doing 1 hour, I'm going to do 15 minutes just so that we can see the changing patterns. So I start here. Obviously, I come here with a bias for the market already, typically looking at where BTC is, where ETH BTC is for alts. So at the moment, I'm short biased. For anyone that follows me probably knows that. So what I'm looking at is which coins are overly longed. That's what I'm interested in at the moment, because I think if I can find a coin where retail are overexposed long, some whale will take advantage of them and will squeeze them to the other side. So in that context, I'm looking at global longs. I want the ones that are overly long, which is the bright red ones. And I'm particularly interested in changes in pattern. So I'm looking light going to dark type of thing, because those are the ones that have freshly been longed.
So go to the color pane and put in min 70 then. So let's see what that looks like.
Min 70.
On the color scale, minimum color scale.
The drop down top right.
Minimum
color scale 70, and then you can type in
75.
Oh man, Amoeba's getting.
Yeah, he's learning. I knew he didn't know. That's why I was excited.
And then on the max, on the max, you can type in 80. So what it's doing is it's just focusing on coins that are showing 70 to 80. Anything below 70 is in this green color. So
that's a good way of doing it. Yeah.
See?
I would be, so this one AZA is 70. This would be perfect. Look at AZA. AZA was bright green.
Yeah, that was great.
Just recently it started changing. This is my type of interest at this point. I wouldn't do anything with it, but that would be, AZA would be one to dive into for sure. Let's pick on AZA, because that looks like it's just changed. So that's all I use the screener for, is to spot the ones I'm interested in. So I'll start with AZA, and then I'd go to the coin screener, to the probability histos. And let's see if I have ADA saved up. And in here, I look at several histos. Yeah, this is good. So the first thing I look at is global longs. Again, it just confirms my bias that retail are unusually long, let's say. So this one is 95% of the times they're having less longs than there are today. So we are in the 5 percentile here. That's interesting. It's starting to stick in there. So maybe that will change over the next day or so. I'm looking at 7 days look back, by the way. But this is interesting. From a retail perspective, I can see that they are very long. And if you look at the delta, they are still long again. So that dip that we had today, retail are probably seeing it as an opportunity, which for me is great, because I think that they will be offsides based on my bias. I also look at top traders accounts long and top trader long positioning. The way I read that is top accounts long in the same way as retail. Yeah, it doesn't have to be retail only that are offsides. In this case, I see it as they are both offsides. Top traders less so, because it's 89% of the times they have been less long than this, so it's not that skewed, but it's good enough for me. It's and you can see that it's increasing as well. So in terms of long squeeze potential, the way that these two top histos are showing it, I've got an interest. That keeps me interested. In the picture I'm building, I'm thinking there's enough to squeeze from those people that have just taken position in the last week. The other thing I look at is long positions, and this is more for the trigger. What I've noticed is that positions start changing when whales are ready to squeeze. So if my thesis is right and these longs are going to be squeezed, at some point this is going to change. But the other one that I find really interesting is whale versus retail. And you guys correct me if I'm not sure if I've been reading this right all along, but the more negative it is, that means that whales are selling more than retail. Is that the way to read it?
Yeah, I think exactly correct. Instead of selling, I would say they're more on the short side. So
exactly. Yeah, they are overpowering retail. Yeah, and
exactly.
So this is great for my thesis because this shows not only that it's skewed to the left, which is what I want to see, and it's in under 10% of the times it's been lower than this. But look at the numbers; it's already in the negative, and this is not always the case. Often you have positive numbers here. So that's how I build the picture, and then there's an element of TA.
But before you do that, I just wanted to point out one more thing that I thought was really cool. I don't know if you mentioned this, but like even for the first indicator, the global long distribution, not only is the current value all the way on the right end of the graph, but even the delta, like how much it changed. I can't read your screen fully properly, but I think it says 8%.
Yeah,
right. So it moved all the way from like the left end of the graph all the way to the right end of the graph in that one day. So it's not like it's been sitting there for a while. It's been a recent like huge spike because the range is pretty tight. So 8% on this graph is a pretty big jump.
How do you guys define or identify or differentiate between top trader accounts and top trader positions? That's always been like a question of mine.
That's a great question. So by the way, all three of these indicators, global long accounts, top trader accounts, and top trader positions, that comes directly from Binance. So it's not like a prediction or estimation. It's straight from the exchange. So top trader accounts is similar to global accounts in the sense that you're looking at individual accounts. So each account gets one vote. So it doesn't matter what your size is. Even if you're in a $1 million long or $1 long, you still get one vote. So over 100 accounts, if 80 accounts are in the long, that's 80%. Top trader accounts looks at, and the way Binance defines top traders is I think it's top 20% by margin. So essentially the largest accounts. And so it looks at those accounts, and top trader, because it has the words accounts in it, it's still looking at the accounts in that top 20% range. So let's say you have 100 accounts, it's going to look at those 20 large accounts, and in those 20 accounts, it'll still give it it'll still be by account. So if 10 are in a long and 10 are in a short, then it's 50-50, 50% long, 50% short. But top trader position is by the size, right? So for example, out of those 20 accounts, if 19 of them are in a long and one of them is in a short, that's 95% long on the top trader accounts. But on top trader positions, let's say those 19 accounts combined are in a $2 million long combined, all their sum. And the short is in a $2 million long with the one account that's in a short, right? So there's an equal dollar size of 2 million long and 2 million short. Then it's going to be 50%. Even though the top trader accounts is 95% long, the top trader positions is 50% long because it's looking at dollar size.
Got it. That makes sense. Vineet, anything you want to kind of add to the histogram tutorial for us?
Nothing really. I think we covered most of the stuff.
Awesome, guys. I think that pretty much wraps up today's episode. We've talked about a ton of stuff. We talked about the coin screener, went through how you can actually go about building your system, looking at the coin screener, deciding what assets are actually worth trading for the day, right? We talked about the histogram, the theory behind it, how we actually might use it to create a thesis, then how you actually look at the data to actually form that thesis. And then we were lucky enough to have Amoeba to kind of come on and actually in real time provide his, analysis and example to run through from coin screener to histogram to actual ADA chart. Looks like we're going to probably get a nice short that he's going to post on Twitter in the next few days, I'm assuming. But yeah, guys, really appreciate Hyblock coming on today. It's been a great episode. And that pretty much is all for me. Any last parting words, Trip?
No, I'm digesting it all because now I need to redefine my system, how I approach my my daily trade plan. has simplified a lot of things for me. So glad to have you guys on. It's been a long time coming.
Thanks, Vineet, Shub. Any final goodbyes? And that's that.
Thanks for having us. This was great.
Nothing
All
for
right,
me.
take care,
Thanks, guys.
guys.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, guys. We'll see you guys
Yeah.
next week. Captain Cole signing out.